hospital chaplain at St. Mary's Hospital on the outskirts of Chicago. A sprawling maze of long corridors, flickering fluorescent lights, and stories that never see the light of day. By day, the place hums with hurried footsteps, beeping machines, and hushed conversations. But at night, St. Mary's transforms into something else, a place where the darkness seems to breathe and things that shouldn't exist linger in the shadows. A few months ago, I was called to room 312 to pray for Edgar Thompson, a 62-year-old man in the final stages of lung cancer. Edgar had no family, or at least no one who visited him in his last weeks. He'd lie there, his cloudy eyes fixed on the window, as if waiting for something he never spoke of. I was used to sitting with patients like him, reading scripture, whispering words of comfort, though I often wondered if they could even hear me. That night, the sky outside was pitch black, not a star in sight. I entered room 312, the glow from the monitor casting eerie shadows on the walls. Edgar lay still, his breathing so faint it was like a candle about to flicker out. I opened my Bible, read a short passage, my voice blending with the steady beep of the machines. When I finished, I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the fragility of his body through the thin hospital gown. "Rest easy, Edgar," I whispered, knowing he likely couldn't hear me. I gathered my things ready to leave. The room was steeped in a strange stillness, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I stepped into the hallway, but an uneasy feeling made me glance back through the slightly ajar door. And then, my heart stopped. Edgar was sitting upright in bed. Not the way a weak man might struggle to sit. He was rigid, his back straight as a board, shoulders squared like a statue. His bony hands rested stiffly on the sheets, fingers pale in the dim light. His face, God, his face was blank, devoid of emotion. His skin was waxy, lips thin and closed. His eyes were wide open, staring at the corner of the ceiling where the shadows seemed thicker than they should be. I stood frozen, my breath catching in my throat. "Mr. Edgar?" I called, my voice trembling, barely audible. No response. He didn't move, didn't blink. I took a step inside, my shaking hand reaching for the monitor. No heartbeat, no pulse. Edgar had been dead for nearly an hour according to the machine's timestamp. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was some physiological quirk, maybe rigor mortis setting in early. But deep in my mind, another voice whispered that I was witnessing something not of this world. I took a deep breath, forcing myself closer. "Mr. Edgar, can you hear me?" I asked, though I knew there could be no answer. And then it happened. His head snapped toward me. Not slowly, not naturally, but a sharp, jerking motion like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. The crack of his neck echoed in the silent room, making me jump back. His mouth slowly opened, revealing yellowed teeth. And then, from those lifeless lips, a sound emerged, a raspy, guttural whisper like wind through dead branches. "You see me." I couldn't take it. I stumbled back, my trembling hands slamming the door shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty hallway. I ran, not daring to look back, feeling Edgar's dead eyes boring into me through the walls. My breath came in short gasps, my heart pounding like it would burst. I locked myself in my office, huddling in the dark, trying to convince myself it was a hallucination. The next morning, I overheard the nurses whispering they'd found Edgar in room 312, still sitting upright, eyes fixed on the ceiling. No one could explain it. The doctors called it a rare case of rigor mortis, but their voices lacked conviction. The nurses, some who'd worked at St. Mary's for decades, avoided eye contact when they spoke of room 312. They started calling it the dead room, where the lights always flickered even after repairs and where whispers sometimes came from empty walls. I tried to return to my routine, but every time I passed room 312, a cold dread seeped into my skin. I began hearing stories from the night staff. Those who swore they saw a figure sitting on the bed in room 312, its white eyes staring at the ceiling. One nurse said she'd heard soft knocking from inside the room, though it had been empty for weeks. Another claimed she saw a man's shadow pass the window of room 312, though the third floor has no exterior walkway. I never told anyone what I heard that night. The whisper, "You see me," still echoes in my mind when I close my eyes, but I started wondering. What was Edgar looking at on the ceiling? Was something waiting for him there, something only the dead could see? Or was he trying to tell me something, a secret St. Mary's had buried long ago? The more I thought about it, the more curious I became, though fear clung to me like a shadow. I started digging through old hospital records, searching for answers about room 312. I found a report from decades ago about a patient who died in mysterious circumstances in that room. His body found sitting upright, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The case was hushed up, but the detail that chilled me was the patient's name, Edgar. I don't know if it was coincidence or a curse tied to that room, but last night as I passed room 312, I heard it again. A faint whisper like wind through dead branches. "You see me." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. But deep down I know Edgar, or something wearing his face, is still there, sitting in the dark, waiting. And I'm terrified that one day I'll have to face whatever he saw on that ceiling. I'm Michael, a hospital chaplain at Mercy General in Seattle. An old building steeped in the sharp scent of antiseptic and the weight of countless untold stories. My job is to bring comfort to those facing the end, but sometimes I feel like I'm stepping into another world, one where fluorescent lights can't banish the darkness and the familiar sounds of the hospital are drowned out by whispers that shouldn't exist. It was a stormy night. The sky outside black as ink, rain pounding against the windows. I was called to room 204 to pray for Clara Nguyen, a 55-year-old woman in the final stages of lung cancer. Clara was a strong woman, but her last weeks had worn her down. Her once bright eyes were cloudy, her voice a faint whisper. I'd sat with her many times, reading scripture, listening to her stories of working at Pike Place Market, singing karaoke with friends. But that night, there was a heaviness in the air, like the room was being pressed down by an unseen force. I stepped out of the elevator on the second floor, the west corridor stretching out before me, its fluorescent lights flickering faintly. The rain's rhythm against the windows was steady, but something made me shiver. I passed closed patient rooms, the beeping of machines echoing from behind. And then, I saw her. At the end of the corridor, near a window overlooking the parking lot, a woman stood motionless. She wore a hospital gown, the pale blue kind we still used, but something was off. The gown looked worn, its edges frayed, as if it had been worn for decades. Her long black hair hung loose, obscuring her face. Her arms hung limp, her pale fingers still. She stood there, not moving, like a forgotten statue in the shadows. I stopped, my heart pounding. Maybe she was a patient who'd wandered off, I told myself. It wasn't uncommon at Mercy General, especially at night, when those with dementia or pain roamed from their rooms. I cleared my throat, keeping my voice calm. "Hello, ma'am," I called. "Do you need help?" No response. She didn't turn, didn't move, but a wave of cold air washed over me like someone had opened a door to winter. My breath fogged in the air, though the hospital's heating was on. I took a step toward her, clutching my Bible. "Ma'am," I called again, my voice wavering. And then she moved, not turning or walking, but gliding like a shadow sliding across water. She vanished into the darkness at the corridor's corner, leaving behind a faint whisper like dry leaves rustling. "Don't come closer." I stood frozen, my blood turning to ice. I looked around, but the corridor was empty. No footsteps, no sign of anyone. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was exhaustion playing tricks. I'd been working all day, and night shifts always strained my mind. I continued to room 204, but the unease clung to me like a shadow. When I entered, Clara lay there, her breathing faint. I sat beside her, reading a passage, but my mind was haunted by the woman in the corridor. When I finished, I placed a hand on Clara's, feeling the chill of her skin. "Rest easy, Clara," I whispered, but Clara didn't rest. An hour later, a nurse called me back. Clara had passed, her eyes wide open as if staring at something terrifying. I stood by her bed praying one last time, but the room felt oppressive, like someone was watching. As I left, I turned to the nurse, Rachel, and asked about the woman in the corridor. "You saw someone in the west corridor?" Rachel asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. I nodded, describing the woman, old gown, long hair, motionless stance. Rachel's face went pale. "Father Michael, that was Clara." I felt the floor drop beneath me. "Clara, but she just..." I trailed off, unable to continue. Rachel nodded, her eyes full of fear. "I know, but what you described, it's exactly Clara. She used to wander the west corridor when she was stronger, saying she liked watching the rain through the window. But she's been bedridden for weeks." I couldn't believe it. I'd seen Clara, or something wearing her form, before she died. But what chilled me more was Rachel's story about the west corridor. 50 years ago, it was the site of a horrific incident. A group of patients neglected during a disease outbreak had taken their own lives there. Since then, night staff reported seeing shadows gliding through the corridor and hearing whispers with no source. I didn't sleep that night. The image of Clara in the corridor haunted me, her whisper, "Don't come closer," echoing in my mind. I started researching Mercy General's history, digging through old records in the hospital library. I found a report from 1973 about a patient named Clara Nguyen. Not my Clara, but another woman with lung disease who died in the west corridor after being abandoned. The report said she'd cursed the hospital before dying, vowing her spirit would never leave. The deeper I dug, the more afraid I became, yet curiosity drove me. The whispers began appearing in my dreams, clearer, as if trying to say something. One night, passing the west corridor, I heard it, a clear, cold voice. "They left us." I spun around, but no one was there. Just the flickering fluorescent lights and the feeling that I wasn't alone. Now every time I pass the west corridor, I feel Clara's eyes or something wearing her face watching me. I don't know if she's trying to warn me or draw me into the hospital's dark secret. But I know one thing. Mercy General isn't just a place of healing. It's a tomb for forgotten souls, and I'm afraid I've awakened one of them. I'm Sarah, a hospital chaplain at St. Joseph's in New Orleans, where the musty smell of the bayou mingles with antiseptic, creating an eerie atmosphere. This hospital has stood for over a century, witnessing countless tales of life and death. As a chaplain, I'm used to facing pain, loss, and moments when the line between this world and the next blurs. But nothing prepared me for what I encountered in the South Wing. It was a quiet night, the air heavy with an approaching storm. I just finished a long prayer session in the ICU where a young patient had fought to their last breath. I was exhausted, but my work never stopped because I was tired. I was heading to my office when the head nurse called. The South Wing needed me to check on a panicking patient. The South Wing was an older part of the hospital, rarely used, with narrow corridors and dim lights. Staff avoided it at night, whispering about shadows and strange noises. I entered the South Wing, my shoes echoing on the old linoleum floor. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. A cold draft hit me, though no windows were open. And then I saw him. At the end of the corridor, a boy about 10 years old sat on a chair wearing an outdated hospital gown, the thick cotton kind unused since the 70s. His messy hair obscured his face, and his bare feet dangled above the floor. He sat motionless, hands clasped tightly in his lap. Something was wrong. He was too still, like a statue placed in the wrong spot. I stopped, my heart racing. "Hey, kiddo," I called, keeping my voice soft to avoid startling him. "You okay?" No response. He didn't move, didn't look up, but the air around me turned icy like I'd stepped into a freezer. My breath fogged, and a strange foul smell like damp earth and decay filled the corridor. I took a step toward him, my hand trembling. "Kiddo, I'm a chaplain. I can help you." And then he looked up. I froze. His eyes, God help me, his eyes were pitch black. No pupils, no whites, just endless voids. He smiled, revealing sharp, inhuman teeth. The smile stretched too wide, distorting his face like a painting gone wrong. A primal chill ran through me like something was crawling under my skin. "You don't belong here," he whispered, his voice not a child's, but deep and echoing like it came from a cavern. And then he dissolved. Not walking or running, but melting like black smoke curling into the air. The foul smell grew stronger, making me choke. I stumbled back, my heart hammering, clutching the cross around my neck. I ran to the nurse's station, my breath ragged. "Is anyone in the South Wing?" I asked, my voice shaking. The head nurse, Diane, gave me a strange look. "The South Wing's been closed for a month, Sarah. We're renovating. No one's there." I told Diane what I'd seen. Her face paled. "You said he was wearing an old gown. There's something we don't tell new staff. The South Wing had a small fire 40 years ago. A boy, a patient, was lost. But..." She paused, swallowing hard. "Night staff say they still see him. Sometimes a shadow, sometimes crying." I didn't sleep that night. The boy's black eyes and twisted smile haunted me. I started dreaming of him standing at the corridor's end, whispering words I couldn't understand. In my dreams, he led me to a locked door in the south wing, and I heard screams from inside. I decided to investigate, digging through old hospital records. In the archives, I found a painting of a boy identical to him with a handwritten note. "Don't look into its eyes." The record said the boy, Jacob, didn't die in the fire, he vanished, and the hospital never found his body. The deeper I dug, the more afraid I became, yet curiosity drove me. I started hearing a child's laughter in the south wing, even when I was on another floor. One night, passing by, I saw a tiny handprint scorched into the wall, like someone had touched it with a burning hand. I know the boy, or whatever wears his face, is still here, and I'm terrified I've caught its attention. But I can't stop. I need to know the truth about Jacob and what's really lurking in the south wing. I'm James, a hospital chaplain at Grace Memorial in Boston, where the walls seem to soak up the sorrow and hope of thousands of patients. My job is to bring comfort, but sometimes I feel like I'm battling forces I can't comprehend. The hospice ward at Grace Memorial is where the line between life and death blurs, and where strange stories worm their way into my mind, never leaving. It was a crisp fall evening, golden leaves rustling outside. I was called to room 108 to see Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a 70-year-old woman in the final stages of heart failure. Evelyn was a wise woman with bright eyes and a warm smile, though her body had weakened. I'd sat with her many times, listening to her stories of teaching, traveling to Paris, and her late husband. But that night, Evelyn had something different, a restlessness I'd never seen. I entered the room, the dim light from the bedside lamp casting shadows on her face. She lay in bed, her frail hands clutching the blanket. "Father James," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "There's a man. He comes every night." I sat beside her, keeping my voice calm. "A man? You mean a nurse or doctor?" She shook her head, her eyes glinting with fear and resignation. "Number. He's not from here. He has white eyes like fog. He stands in the corner singing a strange song. Not English, a language I've never heard. It makes me cold to my bones." My heart beat faster. I'd heard patients speak of dreams or hallucinations near the end, but something in Evelyn's voice chilled me. "Did you say anything to him?" I asked. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I'm scared. He doesn't speak, just sings. And those eyes, they look right through me like they see my soul. I don't know what he wants, but I feel he's waiting for me." I tried to comfort her, reading a passage and praying, but my mind was in turmoil. I left Evelyn's room uneasy, the image of a man with white eyes haunting me. Over the next days, Evelyn's condition worsened. She grew weaker, but every night she spoke of the man, always the same song, the same eyes. I wondered if he was a symbol of death or something far worse. Then came the night Evelyn passed. I was in another room praying for a patient when a nurse called me back. Evelyn was gone, but the air in room 108 was heavy, like something lingered. The nurse, Laura, stood at the door, her face ashen. "Father James," she whispered, "I saw something right after Mrs. Evelyn died. A shadow glided out of the room. It didn't walk. It floated like black smoke. And on the wall, She pointed to a scorched handprint as if someone had pressed a burning hand against it. I stepped into the hallway, my heart racing. There was no sign of anyone, but I felt a presence, like someone was right behind me. I asked Laura about the man Evelyn described. She shook her head, her voice shaky. I don't know, but I've heard stories. Old staff say this ward was used for strange rituals long ago. I couldn't let it go. I started investigating, digging through Grace Memorial's records. In the hospital library, I found an old leather-bound book about a 19th century ritual performed here to guide souls to the afterlife. But the book warned. The entity summoned was no angel, and it demanded a price. Those who called it vanished, and the hospice ward was built over the ritual site. I began hearing the man's song in my dreams, a chilling melody, not of this world. One night, passing room 108, I saw the scorched handprint on the wall had grown larger, like something was trying to break through. I know the man, or the entity wearing his form, is still here, and I'm terrified I've become its target, but I can't stop. I need to know the truth about Evelyn and what's waiting in Grace Memorial's shadows. I'm David, a hospital chaplain at Hope Haven in Atlanta, where the southern sun never quite dispels the heaviness of the hospital corridors. My job is to bring hope, but sometimes I find myself facing mysteries even faith can't explain. The hospice ward at Hope Haven is where stories of life and death intertwine, and where I once encountered something beyond my understanding. It was a sweltering evening, the air thick despite the air conditioning. I was called to room 306 to see Mr. Samuel Reed, a 68-year-old man in the final stages of liver disease. Samuel was a quiet man, with a sad smile and eyes that always looked distant. I'd sat with him many times, listening to him talk about his days as a carpenter, crafting chairs by hand. But that night, Samuel had something to share. "Father David," he said, his voice weak but clear. "Last night, a nurse came. She was so kind. She held my hand, said everything would be okay. I wasn't scared anymore. I smiled, thinking it was one of Hope Haven's dedicated nurses. That's wonderful, Mr. Samuel. What was her name?" He closed his eyes as if trying to recall. "Margaret, I think. She wore a white uniform, old-fashioned, with a nurse's cap. Her voice was gentle, like my mother's. She reminded me of an old friend." I nodded, but something felt off. A white uniform with a nurse's cap? Hope Haven hadn't used those in decades. I glanced at the nurse by the door, a woman named Emily. Her face was pale, like she'd seen a ghost. "Margaret?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "Father David. Margaret was a nurse here, but she died 20 years ago in a fire." My blood ran cold. "A fire?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Emily nodded, her eyes fixed on Samuel. "Yes. She was the best nurse. She saved many patients during the fire, but she didn't make it out. People still talk about her like a legend." I looked back at Samuel, who was still smiling as if unaware of the strangeness. "I know it was her," he whispered. "She had the same smile as my old friend. She said I'd be okay." I tried to comfort Samuel, but my mind was reeling. A nurse dead for 20 years, comforting a patient? I left the room uneasy, Margaret's image haunting me. In the days that followed, I started seeing a woman in a white uniform in other patient rooms, always in the shadows, smiling at patients before vanishing. I decided to investigate. In the hospital's archives, I found an old photo of Margaret taken before the fire. She was exactly as Samuel described, gentle smile, white uniform, nurse's cap. But what chilled me was the photo's background. She stood beside a formless black shadow like it was clinging to her. The record said the fire wasn't an accident. A disturbed patient had set it, and rumors claimed he'd summoned something before dying. I began feeling the shadow's presence. One night passing room 306, I heard whispers from inside, though the room was empty. I opened the door and saw a scorched footprint on the wall, like someone had walked with burning feet. I know Margaret is still here, protecting patients, but I'm terrified the shadow in the photo is hunting, and I might be its next target. But I can't stop. I need to know the truth about Margaret and what's lurking in Hope Haven's darkness.